Welcome to Eisner Health's IMO Problem IT Plus training video. This version of IMO will continue to allow us to easily search for diagnoses, but will also allow us to edit our problem lists and copy forward plans for our assessments. The IMO button is still located on the NextGen assessment template. When you click on it, your screen may have an HCC button in orange. Please unclick this to get all of the patient's problems. The left-hand side of the screen has 4 tabs where you can add assessments to today's encounter. The first is our regular Problem IT search. The second is the patient's problem list. You may have to click on the IMO Intelligent Problem List button to see all of them. The third tab is the patient's billing history, which can now be sorted by date and alphabetically. And the fourth tab is to add to your own favorites. The right-hand side of the screen lists where you want the assessments to be added to today's assessment, to the problem list, or to both. You can add the assessment to your favorites by clicking on the star. It should turn orange. Now I'm ready to add a diagnosis to today's assessment. I'm also adding it to the problem list at the same time. I'm going to my Problem IT search engine and I'm typing in asthma and hitting enter or search. This brings up my ICD-10 diagnoses of asthma. I can use the plus sign or the greater than sign to select a diagnosis. Using the greater than sign adds to the specificity of the ICD-10 diagnosis. You can see now that it collapses down to make it easier to see the final diagnosis that you want. When you find the diagnosis you want, press on the plus sign. This will now be added to today's assessment and also to the problem list. Here I'm adding the assessment of overweight from the problem list on the left-hand side to today's assessments. The HCC list in the problems will be useful if you see Medicare patients and you need to diagnose the HCC conditions once a year. Next, I'll be selecting diabetes from the patient's problem list. It requires more specificity before it can go into assessments, and I need to add in the use of insulin before I can add it to the assessments for today. Now let's try adding an assessment from the patient's billing history. You can see the billing history is by alphabetical order. You can also select it by date, which will pull all the ICD-10 codes first. I'm going to select dermatitis from the patient's previous billing history. It wants a little bit more specificity. I'm going to continue with unspecified and press the plus sign. And now we'll go to today's assessments. The last tab is favorites. For those of you like me who constantly look up favorite diagnoses over and over, this will be very useful. You can add in favorites and select them much more easily. In this case, I'll be selecting heart murmur. Diagnoses can be added to the patient's problem list in a similar manner. Here, I am adding in HIV positive to the patient's problem list. I've selected problem list on the right-hand side and will be searching HIV positive on the left. All patients with a confirmed positive HIV test or HIV disease need to have this added to their problem list and the date of onset added as well. If you don't know the exact date, please use January 1st of the approximate year. I'll be teaching you to do this later. Because I had the star in the upper right-hand corner highlighted while I did my searches, my diagnoses I've searched will show up in my favorites. Here you can see the HIV disease that I just added in. Okay, ready for some new stuff? IMO also provides the ability to manage or add additional detail to the individual diagnoses. Here I'm on the assessments. I'm choosing an assessment. By clicking on the right-hand side, I am pulling up a modification screen on the left-hand side. This tells me the diagnoses, when it was diagnosed before. I can change dates on this and change status. I can also add it to my problem list. I can also add it to my favorite diagnoses. And I can update the diagnosis if I don't like it. You can also chart from this modification screen on the left-hand side. The HPI notes don't work, so please don't add anything in there. Nothing will go in. The impressions is the top left-hand corner in your AP details, and you can add in your plan here and it'll show up there. If this patient had this diagnosis before, you can look at the previous dates and look at the previous plans by clicking on the date. This will bring up the previous plan from that year or that date, and you can change and modify it. Using this, you can carry forward previous impressions and plans from previous visits. Here I'm selecting a previous plan, and I'll be editing it to reflect what I want for today's encounter. Once I am done editing my plan, I have to click on the diskette in order to save, and this will now return me back to my assessments. I'm clicking on diabetes and looking at my previous diagnoses dates and selecting my last diabetes plan, checking to see if it's what I want, and adding save. Next, I'm going to be selecting dermatitis, and I'll be using the button My Phrases as a different option for adding into my plan. Here I'm just going to select a random saved my phrase, and I'll be adding a little bit more information to today's assessment, and then I'll be saving and closing it. If you don't hit the diskette like I am doing now, you'll be unable to go to the next assessment. Here you can see what happens if I click on another assessment without using the white return arrow or the save button. You see the diagnosis did not actually change. The red X actually removes the assessment altogether. Now let's go to the problem list. It'll be much easier for us to edit our problem list using IMO. You'll now see that it is based on system. I'm going to be editing the HIV positive problem that we added in earlier. Again, the HPI notes does not work, so please don't add anything there. You can now add this to the assessments if you have not already. You can update the problem, and you can also merge it with another problem. You can also resolve it to the past medical history, but if you have quite a few notes there, I'd be careful because I don't know if the notes carry over. Here you can change the onset date, which is what I want you to do for HIV disease. And in this case, I'll be adding in January 1st of 2014. Now I'll be adding in a note to attach to this problem on the problem list. Remember, all problems and notes do print out on the Master IM, which is our legal document. You'll need to press on the little diskette in order to save this note. Next, if you want to go to your next problem, you have to go back and either save or press the white arrow key. Here you'll see me trying to add asthma back in, and it won't go in without my pressing the back arrow. I have two asthma diagnoses here, and I want to merge them. On my old asthma diagnoses, I have a note already present. On my new, more specific asthma diagnoses, there is no note. I'm going to merge the two diagnoses in the problem list together. And now you'll see the old asthma diagnoses has dropped away. And I have the old note still present, but the new note will actually say something else. So I'm going to Control C and copy the note and replace the merged note with the note that I want to have seen when I look at the patient's problem list. I'm going to save with the small save diskette and also save and return with the bigger diskette. Occasionally, when you are editing your problem list, you may get an action required when the IMO description and the stated problem are not correct. In this case, I said yes, and it has updated the problem. Unfortunately, now the problem note says something else that I don't want, and I want to use the previous note that was there. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to highlight it, Control C to copy, and now I'm going to go back using the white return arrow without saving. Now I'm going to go back and click on this diagnosis and paste the note back in. This is also how you want to update notes that were done by other people, because you can only edit your own notes. Always click on the save, small save diskette and the big diskette. Next, I want to update a condition. I've clicked on tobacco use. I'm going to be clicking on update and selecting a new diagnosis. In this case, I'm putting in secondhand smoke, hitting search, and adding the diagnosis using the plus sign. Now you can see on my problem list on the right hand side, the tobacco has changed to secondhand smoke instead. If you want to edit or update your favorites, go to the My IMO button in the bottom right hand corner. Here you can see a list of my favorites. I can select them and delete assessments I don't want anymore. And remember, this is my favorite. It has nothing to do with the patient I'm on. If I want to add in favorites, I can click on the search button and use the IMO search tool to add in diagnoses that I commonly search, such as osteopenia. Here I've added it to my favorites, and it's present on the list here. I'm going to close, and when I go to my favorite tab on the left hand side, I can now see osteopenia there as well. If you have reviewed the problem list, please give yourself credit. This is not yet required, but you can click on the bottom left-hand corner that you reviewed the problem list before pushing Save and Close. If not, you'll get a pop-up asking if you can save and close without reviewing. Now we're back to the NextGen assessments template. You can see that all the plans I've already added in are already there. I can go to the AP Details section and further edit as needed. Don't forget, you do need to still go to My Plan to place your orders, to place your referrals, and to go for follow-up. Here I've gone back to SOAP, and you can see my assessment and plan details, which I added through IMO. When I scroll back up to the top, I can go to the Histories tab, and that's where you can most easily see the problem list. You can of course always see it on the home page as well, but you cannot edit it from there. You can see the new notes that I've placed for the new problems. Remember, you can always hover on the problem list button on the patient ID bar on the top right. Thanks for watching.